Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum and very good afternoon to all. Okay, before we start, I would like to announce that our sharing session is conducted via WebEx, and at the same time, it is also can be viewed via FB Live. Therefore, you can go to our FB page and please like our Arts USM. Please share this session so that as many people can see the post. Okay, besides that, I would also like to announce that there will be CSD and CPD points, provided for USM staffs and students. However, kindly take note that the attendance form will be posted in the chat messages towards the end of the sharing session. Okay, audience, please mute your mic, okay? Your cooperation is highly appreciated. And we'll move to the most most important part of today's ROF. Let me start by introducing our presenter for today. Okay, Dr. Safia Najwa Suhaimi is a faculty member of Graphic Communication Design department at School of the Arts, SOTA. She obtained her Master of Arts from the University of Edinburgh, Scotland, with a research project exploring the applicability of aesthetics in safeguarding the intangible cultural heritage of the world. Then, she continued her PhD study in Swinburne University of Technology in Melbourne, Australia, in the field of experimental aesthetics. She looked at cognitive theories of aesthetic preference and explored why humans like certain aesthetic over others. In her research and design works, Dr. Safia Najwa is keen to explore more about the wonders of aesthetics, especially on aesthetic experiences. Okay, and today she will be presenting on Unified Model of Aesthetics, which also known as UMA, Dr. Najwa, the role of typicality and novelty in the aesthetic preference of design. Therefore, without further ado, I will pass the session to Dr. Safia Najwa. And Dr. Najwa, the floor is yours. You can share your screen.
Thank you so much, Puan Azlina, for the introduction. So I'm going to share my slides now. Okay. So thank you everyone for attending this session on Facebook and also here on Webex. So today I'm going to talk an area of research that I'm currently in, which is research on aesthetics. But specifically today, I will focus on the unified model of aesthetics. I'm going to talk more about this part of the research. And also, I would like to share a bit about my PhD research, which talks about the role of typicality and novelty in the preference of design. Okay, so today's topic will talk all about aesthetics. I'm going to start with an overview of what is actually experimental aesthetics in simpler terms. And then I'm going to go straight into the UMA model to explain how it fits in experimental aesthetics. And then I'm going to look into aesthetic preference as well as how we can use this to transform the value of design and also transform the value of products. So that is more related to what I did for my PhD. Okay, first and foremost, let's talk about experimental aesthetics. This term is might not be too familiar to for everyone because it's a branch of psychology. So coming from a product design background, but currently based in communication design department. So my interest is actually more towards the bigger umbrella, which is aesthetics. So that's why when I did my PhD, I went into aesthetics research and specifically design psychology. So it was pioneered by Gustav Theodor Fechner in the early 19th century. So he wanted to see how psychology, okay, the human psychology, can actually help us in understanding how we react or how we respond to the things around us aesthetically. So the theories involved in experimental aesthetics look at how we experience aesthetics, how we value the things around us, how we actually look at a painting, and then what happens in our brain, how we look at appearances, how we look at visuals. So it's a very interesting research area. So I did put a few of the points here that is related to what I'm going to be talking today. In experimental aesthetics, uh, it also explains humans' aesthetic responses towards not only art, design, and design products, but also the environment. It addresses what determines aesthetic preference in human, what makes human like or dislike something, and it investigates the ideal state or degree of aesthetic preference for design. So there are some measures involved in experimental aesthetics. So let me share how big this area is. There's some studies also, some interesting studies that I can share is that you can actually look at, of course, you can compare website interfaces to see which one will be more like likable to your consumers, but also there were also studies on human, like what type of facial features are considered as attractive for a person. So that's very interesting, but that's not what I'm doing because it involves eye tracking, it involves FRMI. So I'm taking a different route. I'm only going to focus on design products. So here is like a short overview of what experimental aesthetics is about. We talk about aesthetic experience, response, and then go further into judgment, go further into preference. So aesthetic experience, what is considered as aesthetic experience? Okay, it's actually a cognitive process that is influenced by the affective state of a person. So when you are looking at something, you are experiencing something aesthetically, it involves a lot of also aesthetic emotion. Something will happen to you emotionally. It is a very complex phenomenon. Therefore, many scholars are adding to the knowledge. As what I'm doing also, we are always adding to the knowledge of understanding how it works because it's a very, very complex phenomenon. So over time, maybe in 20 years or 30 years, it will be like we will know more about how human experience aesthetics. So I would like to just put here by important points by Paul Hackett, who is also one of the pioneers of UMA, which I'm going to present later. So the way that he sees aesthetic experience is he was able to summarize it in a few stages of what's happening. So when we look at something, for example, we look at a flower in front of us, we perform our own perception already. It's already working there. Within just less than a second, we already have a global impression of that flower. And then in our brain, we will then compare the flowers to the previous flowers that we have seen before. We are like doing everything like, oh, I know this flower. We are categorizing the flower. Is it of a color that I like? Is it a species that I like? You know, we are like processing already. And then we are going to classify. We're going to categorize already in our brain. The flower is actually a flower, and the flower is actually an orchid, for example. So we're doing categorization, and then after that, after we are done with categorization, then we will go into aesthetic processing, where we will ourselves make a judgment whether we like that flower or we hate the flower because of the color or the shape or something. That is a sort of an easier way to understand how experience is happening in our brain. So I'm showing you here a photo of a mural in Scotland because I particularly like this place. So aesthetic experience can happen here. It doesn't mean that only an artwork, only a website, only social media adverts. It can happen here. The experience of you walking into the tunnel while experiencing the aesthetics of the mural. Or it can also happen here while you're just out in the garden, like I mentioned just now, flowers, something is happening. When I'm showing you this video, something might happen in your brain, whether you hate the orange flower or maybe you feel like you want to buy the flowers after this. Okay, so this is what is considered as aesthetic experience. I hope that these two samples is able to let people understand that it can happen anytime, anywhere, and on any object, any encounter. Okay, so now we go into UMA. What is UMA? Okay, what is Unified Model of Aesthetics? So this is we have a website, Project UMA. Okay, it starts with a very simple but very complicated question. In order to understand why do humans like things? Why do we like things that we like? Why do we hate something? Why do we hate the visuals? Why? So why is very subjective. Okay, why is a very big question. So Project UMA is trying to understand that from the perspective of psychology and cognitive processes. So, in summary, Project UMA believes that, not believes, I should say predict in scientific term, the UMA model proposes and predicts that when there's a balance of opposing forces, things that are opposite, for example, things that are united, all in order, very organized, and also versus variety, maybe a bit cluttered, maybe different kinds of things put together. When these two forces come together, we will come to have a balance of what we call the ideal state of preference. We can also compare not only unity and variety, there are three levels. There's also connectedness and autonomy. I'll explain this later with the diagram, it's better to understand. And also typicality and novelty. So Project UMA proposes that when there's a balance of opposites, such as the three mentioned here, we are able to understand and see how it affects and influences our aesthetic pleasure for design or for art. So based on the projects and based on the studies that have been done in Project UMA, it is actually, this model is capable to actually provide an explanation of what is happening in human nature and also what motivates us to actually like something and what is happening. So it is a work in progress, but we are coming to understanding the unified model of aesthetics real soon, hopefully. So this is the UMA model, Unified Model of Aesthetics. So on the left here is considered as the safety needs, okay? Safety needs, and also on the right would be the accomplishment needs, or rather we can say the opposite of safety is risk. When you're taking risks, if you are trying to take risks, for example, let me just give an example of how you dress up. If you are on the safer side, connectedness, you will try to dress as similar as other people. For example, in a funeral, in a Christian funeral, they tend to wear black. So you're trying to not be different. You want to be in the connectedness, to be the same. You are going to be in that area. But then if you are a bit different, you want that autonomy, you think that you're a risk taker, then maybe you are going to go to a funeral and wear something pink. I don't know. Okay, it's about trying to understand. Oh, okay, autonomy is about being different. Connectedness is about trying to be connected and be the same. And then we have typicality and novelty. Typical are things that are very similar to prototypes. I'm going to show you some example later. But then you also have the opposite, which is novelty. something that looks very weird, very different, very quirky, very unique. So these two are two opposing forces. You cannot be like a novel person at the same time you say that, oh no, I'm being typical. So there is a measure for this, whether it is a typical design or it is a novel design. And then lastly, in terms of the level of social, we have unity versus variety. This is more related to also to graphic design, where we have the Gestalt principle. We learned that a lot. So that actually is under unity and variety. Do we always like something that is always in order? Is it too boring? Or do we sometimes enjoy variety? We like different colors. Okay, it's this is what the research is about, trying to understand how connected we should be to the society, or how we have to be like very very novel, or we have to input so much variety for whatever that you're doing to be liked by people. So the three things that I explained just now is actually explaining the levels of research in this UMA model. So when we talk about connectedness and autonomy, as I also give the example about funeral, it's more related to the social level of preference. And then we go into cognitive level, which is typicality and novelty. This is more towards what I'm doing, because we are going to test on design and design products. So it deals with the cognitive level. And then we also have the last one, which is more related to the graphics and also perception. So it's a perceptual level. So we have three levels, three different groups doing different things to actually understand how aesthetic preference works. So this is the one that I'm going to focus today. I'm not going to talk about social. I'm not going to talk about perceptual. I'm only going to talk about the cognitive level of the UMA model, which is to explain more about typicality and novelty, because it might be a bit confusing if it's a new term that has never been heard before by you. Okay, so I'm just going to try to make it as simple as possible. So I use chairs. Also in my posters, I use chairs because it's the best example to tell people, I think, what is typical and what is novel. So on the left here, it's a typical chair. Why do I say it's a typical chair? Why is it actually considered as a typical chair? It's because when you think of a prototype of a chair, let's say I ask you to think of a chair now, you might have similar perception or similar image in your mind for the left one, with four legs, with a backrest, with a seat, or all the common features of a chair, instead of having similar image like on the right, which is very novel. So novel designs tend to divert away from prototypes. From four legs, you can have like I think three, and then you have like questionable seat there. Are you supposed to recline? All of these crazy designs of chairs. We consider it as being in the novel side. Okay. So how does it relate to aesthetic preference? How does it help with understanding what people like and what people don't like by looking at typicality and novelty? So we have two theories here to actually explain. One is by Berline in 1970. So the way that he sees how novelty can actually affect how we like things is because he said that novelty is actually a variable that has the potential and ability to influence humans' aesthetic preference by by having an arousal potential. So when you look at something novel, something that is different, you will have this feeling or emotion of arousal. I know it's not a good word to use, but arousal in scientific terms, not the arousal that you may think otherwise. Okay, things that are novel has the tendency to create that in our minds, rather than looking at a typical chair. Okay, you've seen it before. It might be too boring for you. It doesn't have that potential to arouse the system and also the human pleasure system, and also the reward system. So Berline said novelty can be a predictor of preference, because when we measure something and we change the novelty level of the design, we can see a different output of how people like, or how people doesn't like the design. And then, although that's a theory, of course, in scholarly research, there's always somebody who would say otherwise. So we have people who took Eleanor Roche's 1978 Principles of Categorization and actually counted what Berline said about novelty. So people that tends to say that no, people like typical stuff. People like typical stuff, not novel and different stuff. Based on what? So their argument is that when something is typical, it's safer. When something is typical, it is more fluently processed in the human brain. When we look at a chair, we right away know that it's a chair. We don't have to add in more understanding, like, oh, what is it, a chair? Is it a table? You know, all of these complicated questions that we have in our mind. It seems that past research has done this and said that it somehow affects the liking. Somehow, when they tested, when it's too difficult to comprehend, like, I don't see it as a chair, therefore they hate it. Okay, so they studies have actually supported this theory, typical theory of by Roche. And then also a lot of people are trying to also see Berline's perspective. Berline saying that it's not always typical, it's not always, those things are not always the things that people like. Okay, so I can say that I am quite pro Berline. Okay, it's because if I show you these two, okay, this one, I think I go to the next one. If we say, okay, if we were to support that novelty has no effect on our liking, then why do we have new Prada handbags like the one here on the left? This is the new design of Prada Summer 2022. And why do we create new car designs? Why do we need to have new designs of BMW? Why don't you just use the BMW from the 1940s, 50s, 60s? Why do we, in the design area, why do we even create new websites? Why don't you just use the websites from the 20 years ago? Because you are so into liking things that are typical, things that are safe, things that are easy to process. So because there is a why there, and because you have to argue through research that Berline has a point, it's not always something that is normal that people like. Therefore, Paul Hackett came in with the theory of combining the two and understanding the two by introducing the Maya principle. This is quite familiar with the product design research people. It's often used also across different kinds of design. But Paul Hackett say there is a joint effect of both. Typicality is not the stronger one. Novelty is not the stronger one. They should not fight each other. There is a connection, and people like things that are most advanced, but at the same time, it is not too advanced, like mind blown. Okay, it has to still be acceptable in the society in how we process in our brain. So this is what he proposes, and this also forms how I continued with my PhD research. Okay, is everyone still there? Sorry. Okay, I know it might be a bit complicated, but I'm trying my best to actually make it as engaging as possible for you to understand why I really like this research area. Okay, so this is where I come in. You have that Maya principle. Okay, we have to understand that typicality is not the stronger one for novelty, or maybe we have to test before we make any claims. Okay, are you pro Berline or are you pro Roche? So this is where I come in for my PhD, which is Project Umar Phase 2. So now they have an understanding of all the projects. They have an understanding of how it works. We have 3 levels. They tested cognitive levels. There are a few projects already. They tested on how people like perceptual, cognitive, and all. But there's also now phase 2. What do we do with that information? So yes, you know what people like and what people don't like. Then what happens? How do you continue with that research? So that is why there is phase 2, product value transformation, where I come in. Okay, it is where this group, my group, phase 2, under the supervision of Emeritus Professor Alan Whitfield and also Professor Deirdre Barron, we are looking at how we can actually use the knowledge to contribute towards design. So from the things that we have found from phase 1, how do we continue to make sure we are able to help the product design industry by creating something, by creating measures that can help with design concepts, that can help with reducing risks. When you design something, you want to validate whether it will be a hit or it will be a flop in the market. So we do have, I understand, coming from product design, we have so many different methods. We have qualitative methods. We talk to the participants. We have observatory, different kinds of observation. We do co-creation, participant design, everything. But this is also an added measures that can further help product value transformation by giving quantifiable evidence, measures, and statistics that can help this, that can help validate the concept. Okay, so this transformation of product value, if you're looking at a manufacturing site, people will say that it's all about the technology, it's all about the system, but coming from the aesthetics, pro aesthetics, we know, right, from the School of Arts, that it's always achievable by understanding the visual appearance. Styling matters, branding matters, how we put it visually matters. So these elements matters in transforming the value of product. Okay, so that leads to my area, which is the role of typicality and novelty in the aesthetic preference of design products. So my PhD research is about investigating how these two opposing forces is able to affect the preference or liking of users for design products. So now we are testing products that are based on concepts and towards manufacturing. So since it's a PhD research, I can't just look into one area. So apart from this, I also look at how, when we look at typicality and novelty as two different variables, how does it correlate? So there is a measure to actually count and measure the correlation. Is it how is the relationship? So when I explain, or maybe when you have read before, you might think that typicality and novelty are opposing forces that can't be combined, or is it always typicality? Is it always typical and novel at the same end, or you cannot measure it together? So it's more on the technical side. So I need to do that also. So I did that also for my PhD research. And also I looked at different categories of products to test this theory. So I looked at 3 different object categories based on their functionality and also aesthetic level. So I'm going to talk about that later. So what we aim to have in phase 2 of product value transformation is that when we are able to understand humans better, when we are able to understand what users like, what they don't like, and we know about their perception of the products that can influence the purchasing decision in the market, it could definitely lead to an increased value and marketability of the design that you're doing. And at the same time, especially for the production of products that are very, very expensive, it limits the risk of production. That's what we're trying to show by including this when you are testing your design concepts. So part of the significance towards knowledge in this area is that we are able to change the product design scene by introducing a new design evaluation method that can help to test the products. It doesn't use qualitative; it's 100% quantitative methods here, and it can be replicated in industrial settings. So by understanding the impact of design, as I mentioned just now, things that are like in factories and all, they might think that design is not important. So we have to show them that design is important even for um, highly functional products. Design is important. Okay, so in my research, of course, I use this as my theories. Okay, we have the Berline. I looked at Berline. I have to look at both. Okay, typicality and novelty, and then also Whitfield's categorical motivational model and how we actually categorize objects, how we actually look at things that motivate us to like it. So that is another model, and of course, the most advanced yet acceptable principle, because it's something that should be further expanded. Okay, and to measure aesthetic preference, you cannot just have a survey and ask people, do you like this? Do you not like this? So sometimes I do see it also in some students where they want to ask and validate whether people will like their posters. For example, they tend to just pick up words that are not validated. So in my research, we have to use, in my group, we have to use a reliable and validated scale of aesthetic pleasure, which is pleasing to see. When we say something is pleasing to see, it means that we like that. If the pleasing to see is rated very lowly, it means that it's not liked. So we cannot ask whether you like or dislike. We ask, is it pleasing to see? Okay. And also part of my research is also looking at the power of first impression. As we know, first impression matters. So it happens also in aesthetic preference. When you look at the camera here that I'm showing you, straight away you can tell me whether it's pleasing to see or not, whether you like it or you don't like it, whether you think the pink is tacky. And at the same time, it's so our brain is like really great, right? We can actually have already a global impression that the camera is pricey, it's expensive. I think the camera works well because there are two different lenses. I think the quality of the material is nice. There's chrome and I don't know. Okay, somehow we we are not forcing ourselves to do the perception. It's already there in first impression. Okay, it's like automatic. That's how the human brains work. And there are some papers that talks only about first impression if you are interested to see under this area of experimental aesthetics. Okay. Based on the proposed functionality and decorativeness variable, I mentioned just now, I had to test on real concepts, right? I had to test on something. It's not just you test, you talk about correlation, you talk about the importance of typicality and novelty, but you can't test it. So I had to test it in my PhD research. So I had 3 different categories of products. So how do we? Yes? Am I over time already? I heard somebody. Okay.
No, you're good. Please
Okay,
continue.
okay, I heard somebody, sorry. Uh, how do we categorize? So there are many other methods of categorizing. So in specifically in my study, I categorize them into their functionality and decorativeness or aesthetics. So I have one category of product, industrial products that are very highly functional with low aesthetics importance, such as industrial machineries, machines in the factories. Do we need design in those kind of products, do you think? So that's what I'm testing. And then we have things that are equally functional. It has to function and at the same time it has to look aesthetic. So what I used was the barbecue design, because partly because of the demographic that I'm doing, which is in Australia and China. Barbecue design seems to be their culture. Barbecues are placed outside in the garden, so it has to be aesthetically pleasing. It's not in our culture, it's not in Malaysian culture, but their barbecue is like their pride. So it has to look nice, at the same time it has to be able to cook steak. Okay, so that is tested in the second category. And then the last category, this is the hardest category to find product, is because what is a product that is very, very highly decorative, but at the same time it has very low function. So if you think of a decorative object like candle holder, it still cannot fit so much as the stimuli that I want to test, as the product that I want to test. Because when I'm testing the three categories, I have to make sure that I test to the extreme. So candle holders cannot be, because they handle candles. Um, what other examples? Maybe decorative, how do you say it? Vase, pasu, vase. Okay, you say that's decorative, but it's still functional because you put flowers inside. So it's very difficult. And then we finally managed to find something that is purely decorative, which is something that you just place on the table as a decorative items. It cannot be a candle holder. It's just there to look pretty. So we tested on that as the third product for the for this category. Okay, so I'm not going to show you all three studies. It's going to take 3 hours. I'm just going to show you one of the studies from my PhD research, which is the first category, which is the highly functional, like industrial machinery object with very low aesthetics importance. So this is the method that I use. Of course, surveys are done through Qualtrics. It's actually very different from getting your own participants. When you're recruiting your own participants, the validity sometimes is questionable. So in order to contribute to experimental aesthetics, it's usually the participants should also be catered. So I have to use Qualtrics here. I have to give them the requirements that I want. The expertise, background, the study background, the age and all, and I will get the participants by paying Qualtrics. So these were the research participants for study 1. Of course, there's a reason why I took China and Australia, mainly because the product that I was testing, the target market, the forecasted target market for the next 10 years would be, the biggest would be China and Australia. So there's also other reasoning, but I'm just going to show you an overview here. So we have 104 people with purchasing backgrounds and design, engineering. We call them the experts. And we also have a balanced number of people who has no knowledge of design, engineering, and general public, to just have a comparison and to see how people would judge things differently. So I'm very fortunate to actually work on a live project. So these were the concepts on the left were real concepts generated for industrial boilers. Industrial boilers are actually machines that are there to steam, used for steam, use the power of steam, generate steam to help with other functions of life, like in the food and beverage industry. So it's helping in the factory. Okay, to put it in simple words, it's something that you use in the factory. On the right are the existing designs that you can find over the internet. So this live project is by my principal supervisor, Professor Blair Keys. He got the project from O'Brien Boilers to actually create new concepts of boilers to make them look pretty. So can you imagine something that is inside the factory? Who's going to look at it? Who's going to even judge whether it's pretty or not? Is it important? Is aesthetic important for this kind of products? So to answer that, actually, not only through this research, but to tell you how they buy boilers is very interesting. Although it's being put in factories, they sell it in like very established exhibitions and events, like you're buying your baju raya and all kan. You have this, you have this showcase, showroom. So people actually look at the visuals. People actually have a first impression of the boiler before even purchasing it, although they know after they purchase it, it will just be in the factory. Okay, so we are also trying to prove in this research that even for things that may not be important, like literally we don't say, pipe rumah tak perlu cantik, something like that kan. So I'm trying to prove here also that it is aesthetic is important even for such highly industrial products. So he generated these 5 concepts. We had a team to actually validate and try to find a range of what will be considered as typical and what will be considered as novel as the design. Okay, yeah. So in our understanding, something that looks different from the one in the market should be novel, right? So let me just share the results after this, and then you will see that what we think is different, we get something else from the survey. So just an overview. This is how the survey was done. It's an online. We had to put all the visuals of the product as it's in the showcase. It's a factory setting. Like it's how people will just judge it during first impression. Okay, so this is one of the ways of how we can capture the first impression and cognitive view of the boiler. If you were to use qualitative methods, then there will be more other steps where you have to touch the material of the boiler, you have to look at the size, you have to use it, you have to test the system. So we are not doing that. We are just looking at how visually, first impression, cognitively, what will happen during the first instant. That is my research. So we had ethics clearance for this. Okay, and then to analyze whatever we got from the survey, I used repeated measures test using SPSS. So because there's no qualitative analysis at all in here. So for the perception, we use GEE, which is a multi-level analysis of understanding what the numbers mean. Okay, generalized estimating equations, partial correlation. We have to understand how to measure everything, and all the tests and measures are referred to a professor of statistics from Swinburne. I had several help coming from a background that hates mathematics. I hate mathematics. I have to be honest. I don't like mathematics. And suddenly my PhD, I have to do a lot of calculation. I cried when I had to do the GEE. So if you just quickly Google generalized estimating equations, maybe you will understand why I cried when I did the GEE because I have zero knowledge of statistics before I started, but I had to learn. So these are just the things that you will get out of the SPSS. So not only you have to understand how to run the test, you actually have to understand what the F means, what the P means, what is this, or what are all these numbers. So I'm not going to show you here only this because it's no use. So I have turned the results into sort of a more approachable visual. So for the question, which boiler design is pleasing to see? Can you guess which one? Okay, so concept number 5 was rated the highest on pleasing to see based on the statistical measures of 4 or 5. Okay, this is just simple result. Which boiler design is perceived as a typical design? So when we put this question out, we thought that of course the 2 would be the one. But somehow, typicality is considered as the third concept. This was like really, can't say mind blown, but a shock. We thought that something in the market would be typical, okay? But no. And then what is the novel one? Somehow, number 5 is still being chosen as the novel, the most novel design. And then for all the questions, we found a pattern. Somehow, when people like this, it's rated very highly or pleasing to see, as you see just now. Somehow, there's a halo effect. Suddenly, the boiler is perceived very highly on material quality. It has the best performance. It has the best technology. It is user-friendly. This shows the impact of first impression right here. When you like something, there is something called the halo effect theory, and it is validated in my study here. Somehow when you like something, suddenly everything is good about that thing. If you like how a person looks, suddenly you see that person, I don't know, smart, intelligent, rich, whatever. Okay, so this phenomenon here is called the halo effect, where it sometimes happens when we like something. Okay, so therefore, just by looking at the first impression of product, we are actually able to see how they perceive the material, how they perceive the performance, technology, and user friendliness, which we thought we could not get this info, but somehow we did get. So it's an extra bonus, uh, apart from typicality and novelty. And so, since it's a live project, we actually took this and presented to the client. Here, I presented nervously to the director of O'Brien Boilers, and if I must tell you, we purposely chose. Wait, let me show. We purposely chose the two existing boilers there that are produced by them. So they were like shocked to see that their current designs are not working. People do not like their current design, so they are happy to see that uh, uh, the team of my professor, that's my professor there under here, if you can see my cursor, that is Professor Blackies, his team and him, the developed concept was taken to manufacturing based on our prediction. And so as you see the final design there, he did not choose the novel one because of course typicality plays a part, and as you remember, it has some typical elements as chosen from the users. It has the novel appearance and also the pleasing to see appearance. So that is now sold in O'Brien Boilers. So just to share, to wrap up, I know, just to wrap up, from this research, I was able to actually publish from this research. Just from study one, I published the left article here, which is only talking about the aesthetic preference of industrial boilers. This is published in Empirical Studies of the Arts, which is indexed in Web of Science. After, don't ask me how many rejections. Okay, of course, it's so many rejections, I almost give up, but it's there. Okay, the data is there. I have to publish. So that is published. And then on the right here is Scopus Index and Journal of Design, Business and Society, where I talk in general how it helps with product value transformation. So although it's from the same research, on the right here, I talk more on the product and manufacturing side. So I still have study 2 and study 3 and the others to actually publish. I don't know when I'm going to publish, if I'm going to publish, okay? And okay, to wrap up, I just have a PSA announcement. This is, I got the Best Thesis Award for my PhD research, and I just want this to be a motivation for all the PhD students that are listening to me now. I hope there are some PhD students here. Just remember that no one has the power to shatter your dreams unless you give it to them. Hold on to your dreams. There will be so many people telling you that you cannot reach your dream. Don't give it to them. Okay? So, thank you. That's all. Okay, I'm done. I should stop sharing, right?
Yes, yes, please. All right.
Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Safia Najwa, for the interesting and insightful presentation. Okay, now I would like to open the question and answers session to the audience. Well, there are two options, yeah. One, you can unmute yourself and personally ask Dr. Najwa Safia in this platform. But then it is much appreciated if you can introduce yourself, the name and where you are from. And or you can also post your questions in the chat box in WebEx, yeah, here, or in the even in FB, yeah, Facebook, yeah. So I will read it for you. So therefore, if you have any question, you are appreciate to ask Dr. Najwa Safia.
Assalamualaikum.
Alamak, ada question.
Salam.
Alamak.
Yeah, Dr. Kamal Sabran.
Question please, Dr. Kamal.
Ni soalan yang bukan dirancang
Okay,
or
tak
plan.
apa. We appreciate your question.
Alamak, apa tu Dr. Kamal?
First of all, thank you for this very interesting and wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
I find out it's very, very insightful to understand how the blend of two typical and also the novelty in terms of design. But my question is, how could we actually use this type of theory so that we can apply in other area? For example, in my area, for example, like music composition.
Okay.
Can it be uh, applicable in this area? Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you, Dr. Kamal. Okay, let me just share with you that in the area of typicality and novelty and measuring preference, there are already several people who's doing on music composition, on music. Is it composition or musical numbers? But there are some on music. But to take directly from my research here, in my thesis, actually, we have proposed an evaluative, like, what do you call that, measures that is applicable to different industry settings. But for me, I actually tested on product design. So if we were to take it for new media and technology, let's say one of your compositions, right, Dr. Kamal? So you can still use the pleasing to see, which is validated now a few times, including mine. You can use the pleasing to see scale to ask about liking and disliking, and then you can use typical and you can use novel as I shown in the survey. But other things must be changed, like the product features. You cannot use that. You can tweak using your own what do you call that, measures. For example, okay, like, okay, I have already stopped sharing this screen. Is it typical, right?
Well,
Is it
Flow
novel?
is a campaign aims to raise awareness about menstrual education for younger generation. This campaign is versatile while by having different aids and style techniques that suitable for younger generations.
Apa ni? What happened?
Alamak. Okay, so the way is to actually use what I have. You can also straight away use what I have proposed in my thesis, but that is definitely can be used directly by 3 product categories. But you can change for music composition and whatever, just change the measures there. And then of course there'll be a different statistical like additional measures. But if you still use GEE, you just follow, you replicate what I use in the methods, it's also applicable. You can try to test I don't know what you test in music, the music based on the steps in my thesis method section, the replicate that.
Yeah, maybe the variable can be changed, yeah?
Yeah. But stick to typical, stick to novelty as the 2 main components in understanding aesthetic preference. That one cannot be changed because that
Yes.
is the proposed one.
Yep. Thank you, Dr. Kamal, and thank you, Dr. Najwa, for the answers. Is there any other question that you are interested to ask? Yeah.
Right.
Okay. I tak buka kamera tadi.
No more
Is there any
questions.
question? Or if there's no question, maybe I'm the one that. Oh yeah, please.
Okay, sorry, Puan Sri.
Yep.
Um,
Assalamualaikum, selamat petang, Dr. Najwa.
Salam.
Thank you for the very insightful presentation, particularly in product design field. I'm just wondering, actually, bukan nak tanya lebih-lebih, cuma nak tahu sajalah. Do you know Victor Papanek?
Sorry, siapa?
Victor Papanek.
I did not use his theory in my
Okay.
Yeah.
Because according to his book, kalau tak silap saya, year 1971. Forgot the book. Hold on, yeah. If I'm not mistaken, the book entitled "Design for the Real World: Human Ecology and Social Change." Plus, with late Professor Dr. Tamis, there is a statement by Dr. Tamis, and then plus with the quotation from the book of Victor Papanek, saying that design is the practice of analyzing, creating and developing products and visuals for mass manufacture. It aims to achieve form which are assured of acceptance before extensive capital investment has been made and which can be produced at the price that permit wide distribution and reasonable profit. Saya nampak macam ada persamaan. Connection, yes, very much a similarity, but the good thing about yours is very detailed. You go in depth. Itu yang saya suka sebab yang apa yang terdapat dalam buku Victor Papanek, dia cuma in general, okay, tentang design or industrial design or product design, but yours is totally in depth. So I hope one day, maybe next time, you can share this, this knowledge or this input, especially to these product design student in USM. So they know. Serious.
Yeah, because thank you so much. If you are willing to read my thesis, actually I have a section only for product design, current measures, and then I compare that to what we are proposing. So yes, I did not put the one that you said just now, but we look at measures such as there are something called personality scale where you can measure the personality of your target audience. There is a measure where the CVPA, centralized visual, is already proposed. But then what is lacking there is the quantifiable evidence. How do you actually measure based on interview, for example? How can you further validate that? So we cannot run away, although I know we all hate mathematics, we cannot run away from validating that in measures that is measurable lah. So this is what I'm trying to propose. It doesn't matter if you're doing co-creation ke, you're doing other types of product design method, it's not wrong, but add this as the final evaluation method right before you actually produce the concept to limit risk. Yeah, thank you so much for the input. I'll look at the book. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Hafizur Rahman, aka Cik Wilson. Okay. Is there any other question? Maybe last one? Last question?
Maybe last question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Okay, so this is very interesting, very insightful. Thank you, Najwa, for your presentation. Congratulations. My question will be regarding the typicality and novelty. I know it's a product design, but can it be applied into digital product design? For example, apps design or any other digital product. Thank you.
Yeah. It's the similar answer for Dr. Kama. Yes, it's applicable, and also not only you can just look at my study, but in UMA and also in the area of typicality and novelty, there are already people doing it on websites, especially websites, and I think app design is still new. Maybe that's for the next things that we can test on. Yeah, because typicality and novelty, it is a very old theory, but somehow it has gained interest more and more now. We can see like a surge of people trying to understand typical. So as what I showed you, I actually combine the two opposing forces and do that for my own research area, research focus. But there are people who only look at typicality and also found something nice where they can apply to their design, and also those who are only concentrating on Berline's novelty, novelty, novelty. Also, there are outputs. So I think especially for app design and digital media design, we need people to come in to actually do research on that so we can grow more in this research area. So that is for the future, I think, for the future.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Hanim, for the question. Maybe from me, the last one, what is one piece of practical advice that you would like to give someone who's starting out on this topic or have any interest in exploring this area?
Okay, practical. I would say that go straight to the source. If you see my theoretical underpinning, one of the theories used in my research is actually by Whitfield. So he's my supervisor. If you are looking at the literature and you found that somebody is doing on novelty, but it's doing on car appearance, for example, go to that person and actually delve more. You cannot just how to say, since it's not like really a big area yet, it's better, the practical solution is to actually go to the source as close as you can, because it's a very I don't want to say difficult. It's not difficult. Everything is difficult. It's a very complex area where you really need to understand even the theories from Roche and Berline. I have made it into simpler form, but actually to understand that even the writing that they write for their papers, very, very susah untuk faham. So make sure you get the right supervision, make sure you get the right source. Go to the source, the real source to menuntut. That is my practical.
So I would suggest they read your paper and please cite. Okay. Promotion though. It's a promotion. Okay. So
Okay, Assalamualaikum.
ada lagi
Can I have
soalan?
another question?
Boleh tanya lagi. Encik Ali
Because this is,
Lutfi, aka Chat.
because it's related to product design, so I think it will be,
Please.
wonderful for us to. Okay, and then anyway, congrats for your thesis, best thesis award. Okay, and a beautiful presentation. Anyway, just want to know that the participant that contribute to your methods, your study, does they have need to have the experience of using the product, or know anything about design, or it can be a public?
Okay.
Because sometimes we're designing something for public, right? So something like general product for universal design, and then it involves a public who don't sometimes don't have any experience about using that product, and they don't know anything about design. So does it count if this participant is a public? Thank you, Najwa.
Okay, so to answer that, I just use my example just now that I showed in the slide. Even for industrial boilers, of course, we have very limited people who can actually have even looked at industrial boilers, right? So when I use Qualtrics to actually get the experts, they are not exactly experts in industrial boilers, but they are experts in the background related to industrial boilers, which is purchasing, the purchasing department, engineers and designers who have a sense of what visual can do. But also I did ask, half of it were from the general public. So my suggestion is, if you were to test anything that will go into the market, of course you can look at our way of doing target audience persona, and then focus that as your main participants. But don't you think that we actually need to find experts to help with the validity? Or if you say no, then you want to focus on general public, then it's also fine. Because okay, let me just say, okay, I'm delving more into my PhD. So one of the findings actually from my PhD is that when we did the statistics, although we separated general public and then we separated engineers who knows about technical, who might or might not seen industrial boiler, work with industrial boilers or not, but they have the expertise. Somehow when we correlate the results, it seems that there is no statistical significance between them. Yes, the numbers of liking are different, but when we go into statistics for significance, it seems that they are like identical. So yes, you can avoid just based on my proposed result. You can just focus on public and you will get also valuable data. No need to go to experts. If you want to go deeper lah. If you want to go deeper, that's what I found in my thesis about statistic. Memang expert pun jawab. I think it doesn't matter whether you have a background or not. Maybe we are inclined towards the same suka benda cantik-cantik. I don't know lah. I don't know how this is. It's still something that we can further research on, and maybe somebody else would take that and do research. Why experts same with public? Why? What's happening? Maybe.
Okay, maybe that one can be taken on by Encik Alif Ikrami as his
Maybe.
research.
Answer my question.
Yeah.
Answer my question. Thank you so
Product
much.
design kan macam is very important. Amateur designer focus and then you dengan expert ada difference, but somehow when you go into deeper, actually we have the same system. We can get the same.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay, interesting. So, is there any other question before we end the session? Ini hangat ni, perbincangan yang hangat. Okay. Alright. So, okay. If there's no more, so if there is no more question, on behalf of SOTA, I would like to thank Dr. Safia Najwa Suhaimi for her interesting presentation. And then special thanks to all the audience that joined us today in ROF. I really hope that the presentation will be beneficial to everybody. But then last one. So by listening to her presentation today, I think it will help us to choose between what we are having for dinner tonight.
Something typical or something no food?
Is it something local or Western food? Is it between KFC or McDonald's? So, yeah, you can.
Typical or novelty food?
Yeah,
novelty food.
Pink sushi.
Yes, I propose novelty sushi.
Novelty means that you need to cook, Dr. Hanim. Very novel. Okay, with that, before that, please fill in your the attendance sheet so that you can get your CPD or CSD point. Okay, for staff and students, it is in the chat box, the message box. So please fill in that before you leave the room. Okay. All right. Okay. So with that, I think Dr. Hadi ada angkat tangan. You want to say anything?
Tak ada.
I salah tekan.
Oh, ingatkan nak cakap I vote for McDonald.
Yeah. They want to please.
Alright. Okay. With that, thank you, and maybe we can see you guys again in next ROF. Okay, bye.
Thank you, Parina. Thank you, Dr. Najwa. Very interesting topic. Congratulations.
Okay, bye.
Bye.